Hi, friends. Abhay Darndekar here from Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Before we get started, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button and tap the alarm bell so you can never miss out on new episodes and content made just for you as we celebrate the vibrant global Indian and South Asian experience. Thanks.
I like to think that what I'm doing is not just judging the food, because I want the critic to connect some dots and kind of open up the world a little bit or take me somewhere.
How have you been able to define excellence as a food critic or a restaurant reviewer? Does that excellence always equate to success?
Restaurants can become meaningful because you keep returning to them.
Right.
You
Right.
make it special by going back and being in relationship with the restaurant. Hi, I'm Tejal Rao. I'm a chief restaurant critic at the New York Times, and this is Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Yeah. My name is Abhay Darndekar, and I share conversations with talented and interesting individuals linked to the global Indian and South Asian community. It's informal and informative, adding insights to our evolving cultural expressions, where each person can proudly say, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. I used to be a voracious reader as a child and a teen, but more recently I've gotten back into it, and kind of as a very direct function of my ongoing learning for this podcast, I've just been simply reading a lot more. And it's taken me a while to sort of better understand that, for me at least, written pieces have a true temperature and a tone. And so I have to tell you, when I read anything by award-winning food writer and now chief restaurant critic for the New York Times, Tejal Rao, I just feel kind of warm and very comfortable. And it's sort of like I'm listening to the ongoing advice of a friend chatting about their experiences. Tejal has had a global upbringing and personal stops in many American cities, with professional stops at the Village Voice and Bloomberg News before the New York Times. And I'm just so pleased to share a conversation with her now on Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Tejal, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
You know, I'm going to tell you, I'm armed right now with a little bit of coffee and my at least my Fuji apple. This is one of my daily midday things. But I have to
What a
ask you,
doctor cliche.
I know, right? Well, there's usually some flax during the day too. But that's for other, I guess, reasons. But I guess the idea here is, these are people have different versions of their rituals throughout the day. Do you have any particular food rituals that either govern you or that you adhere to on a daily basis?
Oh, that's such a great question. Other than the sort of morning coffee ritual, I'm really open. Every day is kind of its own weird adventure that unfolds in a different way.
Yeah, yeah. Sort of take it as it comes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Does anything in a way make you either complete or incomplete from that? Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be a particular food, but is there sort of a cadence to things that, like, yeah, this is kind of the time of day that I really think about food, or I'm sampling food?
Not, I not so much. I think it's all the time. It's pretty constant.
Yeah.
pretty pretty constant. I know people use that word food noise that I've been trying to understand what that means. For
Yeah.
me, it's sort of like it's in the background, and it's a sense of curiosity and desire that I actually find really useful and kind of keeps me, awake to life. I
Yeah.
really need it, and I love it.
I wonder if does that ever get overwhelming for you?
Not really, because I also have, I say it's pretty constant, but I also have kind of lazy moments. Like if I'm home alone for a meal, not that that doesn't happen very often, I'll just have, rice.
Yeah. Back to
That's
the
fine too.
foundational.
Yeah.
Right. So I have to tell you, I really first want to thank you for a couple of years ago, you had this quick mango lassi, or actually a mango kulfi
Oh yeah.
recipe and an article that I really enjoyed. And I guess what was kind of a signature moment for me, at least, was in reading that it was this great combination of sort of being very inviting with the story you were sharing and also very directive. And at that point, I appreciated the directive part because it's sort of like a call to action for me. So when you're writing as a critic, do you need to equally have a story in mind, as well as having something that's either a directive for your reader or even a thesis for them to appreciate or follow.
Yeah, you mean with a restaurant review
Yeah.
itself? I think so. I mean, I think a review can't just be telling people, here's what the food was like. It was this good, it was this bad, it tasted like this. I think there always has to be more. And I actually often think that like the descriptions of the food itself and of the place are doing that work as well
Mm.
when it's working really well. It's like I'm not saying I always succeed at this, but this is the goal. You want to kind of finely tune the food descriptions, the room descriptions, so they're also, in addition to telling the reader what the place is like,
Yeah.
they're giving you the story as well. You can piece that stuff together to tell a story. And I don't always know ahead of time what it's going to be. Sometimes it's like in the sitting down to writing it and
Yeah.
being anxious in front of the blank page. That's sort of when I figure it out as I'm going. And then sometimes I do know. Sometimes that's very exciting. The excitement of knowing what exactly it is I want to draw out before I sit down to write, and then writing almost on the like full body high of that feeling.
Right.
That's really great, but unfortunately, that's not there every time.
Yeah, no, I can't imagine the panic of the blank page
Yeah.
part, but definitely, as you're sifting through the anatomy of a particular restaurant review, must there always be something that you're hoping that the reader takes away as a directive at all?
As a directive, not so much. I mean,
Yeah,
that recipe column that I used to write is interesting because you do want the person to finish reading that piece and then cook the recipe,
go try.
or
Right?
at
Yeah,
least think about cooking the recipe,
yeah,
which is a
yeah.
big ask. They have to go get ingredients. They have to spend time, but in a sense, the column is doing the work of, I don't want to say selling, but in a sense,
Mm,
it's selling the recipe as well. And it doesn't really work the other way around. If someone starts with the recipe, they're probably not going to go to the story, but I'm hoping if someone starts with the story, they'll go to the recipe.
yeah,
But with a review, I'm not necessarily trying to convince you to go to the restaurant or not go to the restaurant. Like
yeah.
I want you to know what I think about the restaurant. I hope that that is very clear, but I'm not trying to sort of impose my sense of taste necessarily on the reader. You know,
Yeah.
it's something else about the world that I want them to leave with.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, like, sort of your opinion, your perspective is now out there, and
Hmm.
sort of it's up to the reader what to do with it. And yet, we live in a very Yelpified, reviewed, constantly, reviewing world. In that sort of spirit, I mean, I've asked this to other people before, in that, is food and the experiences, are they meant to be judged in a way? In the end, I mean, food is a survival. We're all motivated by survival and this concept of sort of dopamine fun fulfillment. And everyone's journey to meet that is very, very different.
Hmm.
But so, since food can serve as both survival and really fun fulfillment, is it really meant to be judged? And does that judgment sort of, should it matter? I know it's
Yeah.
your livelihood and your expertise.
Yeah, I never know how to sort of defend it though, because,
Yeah.
you know, I like to think that what I'm doing is not just judging the food. Like I don't think of
Right.
myself as sitting there and sort of like deciding whether or not the
Right.
food is good or bad. I'm what
Yeah.
I'm trying to do with the review is, like, if I think about the criticism that I love to read a book review or a film review, whether or not I'm going to go see the film, because I want the critic to connect some dots for me and
Mm.
kind of open up the world a little bit, or take me somewhere I can't go, or show me something I might not have seen. It's not just about it's not really actually about passing judgment.
Yeah. Yeah. And from your vantage point, I know in our world, we have to remain agnostic to so many things and pass a judgment, if you will, about like facts that we see. And we're giving our perspective. And in the end, it's up to patients and families to try and take that information and try and see if they can adhere to something. It's not necessarily apples to apples to compare,
That's an
but
interesting comparison, though.
yeah. But in your case, at least, I do appreciate this idea that, like, I wonder if you have to grapple with that a little bit. where you're like, look, I'm not here to guide you or to direct you in a way, but rather to share my experience of a restaurant or a particular dish in that way.
Yeah, I think the times when it's really where it feels a bit agonizing is when it is more negative, right? I think
Mm,
that's when it's much harder. I don't think it's fun to write. It's difficult to write a negative piece, or it's difficult in the moment because you're not enjoying what's happening, but then it's difficult later because you don't I only write about if it feels newsworthy, if it feels worth writing about. And, I wrote a piece recently. I wasn't sure if I wanted to review the place. And then I was thinking about, man, this meal is so expensive and the place is so special and kind of mythological, Spago in Los
Spago.
Angeles. And
Yep.
I was thinking about how it would be for my dad to take my whole family there for a special occasion based on the history of the place and the glamour of the place, and how he would have this expectation for it to be really delicious and really wonderful. And a lot of people can say, oh, the food's not the point, the food doesn't matter. But my dad would go, and if, let's say, the four of us, six of us went out to dinner, that is a very expensive meal
Mm,
to be disappointed by, you
yeah.
know? So and it's not just my dad, it's
Sure.
people,
Yeah. I mean,
people everywhere, Yeah.
well, and that I like how you put that like it's not ever fun to have to put out a negative review.
Yeah.
I also loved how you closed that particular piece with like yes, it matters where you sit, and perhaps that experience does factor into it. But is that something that you've had to practice quite a bit in thinking about like how do you make a negative review for a place like that's going to get published?
I mean, I don't do them that often, and I
Yeah.
think part of that is the culture of restaurant criticism. I think people mostly they want to know about great stuff. They want like they want a sense of discovery and excitement about places. But I also think a negative review has to like earn its spot. If
Mm,
if you're only doing 20 reviews a year, which is around what I'm doing, if I'm going to do one, it kind of has to mean something.
yeah.
I don't want to. I'm not going to be punching down. I'm not going to be like bringing a spotlight to a place that people weren't already thinking about, or maybe or aren't spending tons of money on. There has to be a reason. There has to be like it has to be newsworthy, I think.
Sure. Which is interesting. I've talked to others in other arena of journalism where the negative parts certainly capture eyeballs and views and likes
Hmm.
and that sort of thing. And yet
But
your
that's not my
thoughtfulness, right.
yeah, that's not my mission, I guess. I mean, it's of course I
Yeah.
want readers. I'm writing for readers. I want them there, but yeah, I'm not driven by page counts or
Yeah.
eyeballs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question about, that element then of excellence. How have you been able to define excellence as a food critic or a restaurant reviewer? And does that excellence always equate to success? Are they always going hand in hand?
That's a great question. The first year that I was working as a restaurant critic, I got an award, and it was in 2012. And that when it happened, it felt so exciting. It kind of felt like keep going, like you're doing a good job. And then of course, years go by without an award, and you realize the award is not, the award is exciting, but I've learned to identify when I feel really good about a story. It's like the way the restaurant made me feel, everything that I really observed about the restaurant, I was able to articulate it, and I was kind of
Yeah.
able to be authentic to my experiences there in a way that just everything like aligns and feels right. And that feeling, when I have that after I publish a piece, that's just like, I know I've done it the way that I want to, and that feels really good, you know?
I'll use a very California word. You probably feel pretty stoked.
Yeah. Yes. I'm totally stoked.
Well, and then does that feeling of sort of like saying, "Hey, I've hit this sweet spot." I mean, that isn't always married to success in the eyes of others, or is it for that matter? Like, does it often parallel?
I don't know. I mean, I there's comments on the story, there's comments on maybe like the Instagram post about the story, or
Right.
I don't, I try not to obsess over those or read into those too much. They reflect like a small group of, they reflect the readership, and that's who I'm writing for. And at the same time, I don't want those voices to be the ones in my head.
Sure.
They
Yeah.
shouldn't be.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
They're there in the periphery, but hopefully not at the center.
Yeah.
You've had such a journey that connects so many dots from London to the Middle East to India and Atlanta, New York, and now California. And with so many experiences in food services and food writing and food reporting and at the Village Voice and at Bloomberg News and now critiquing for the Times, how have these added to your portfolio as a leader or as an expert? First off, do you see yourself as a leader and an
I
expert?
don't. I was going to say I'm kind of, I don't know that I am. Feels like I don't know if I would self-label that way.
Yeah.
I do feel like over all of this time, I've become part of a community,
Yeah.
and, writers and editors and people who do this work and really care about it and approach it in different ways. And that's really meaningful to me. But I don't know that I often feel very uncomfortable with the idea of like the hierarchy of power and expertise. And,
Sure.
that feels very, very uncomfortable. But also, I'm at the same time, it's like I'm in this position that,
Yeah. I mean, being a chief critic, there is that sort of word there that
Mhm.
identifies you as the chief critic. And
Yeah.
I wonder if, like, because your background has put you in so many different places and with so many different experiences, whether that adaptability has in fact informed you quite a bit as at least a thought leader or a thought expert.
Um, I mean, I couldn't say how exactly, but yeah, that sense of adaptability it's really important to me. I think, one of the things that keeps coming up is, how do I choose restaurants to review, or what am I looking for? And I'm not looking for just one thing, I'm looking for like a really wide range and a diversity in terms of like price, cuisine, format, kind of every possible way, because I
Yeah.
think, and I don't know, is that like, that's my sense of taste, is sort of that diversity, or that sense of things, wanting things to be really eclectic in some
Yeah.
way that just feels right, you know?
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, particularly given this that spirit of having tasted so many different experiences in so many different places and, being able to be malleable and yet quite engaged, in each of those experiences. I'm curious for you, how much of a role then does nostalgia play in your work versus that kind of newness and that discovery and that even reimagination of old ideas, particularly when you're thinking about how to then write about the experience.
I think, I mean, nostalgia is, I feel like nostalgia is a little bit dangerous, and there are times when I'm overtaken by it, and I can see it sometimes in my work. I'm like,
Mm.
little, this is a little squishy, this is
Right, right.
a little too much. So I'm trying to be just really aware of it. Like when you've shifted into that gear, to be really aware that that's having some kind of effect on you, and not just on me, but on within restaurants. Like when I notice nostalgia for, I don't know, like, if a restaurant has a British colonial theme, what does that
Right, right.
nostalgia
Yeah.
indicate? There's so many different kinds of nostalgia, and I think you, it, what I want to do is have an awareness of my own and of other people, so that I can kind of interpret it in a clear-eyed way.
Yeah. I mean, I was talking once to an executive in the NFL, Parag Marathe, and he shared something very interesting that's saying that, like, you don't want your past experiences to allow you to get seduced
Hmm.
in a way, nor do you want them to bring you down. They will provide that unfair bias to sort of how you engage in each experience. And I imagine that that's sort of the same thing,
Yeah.
where you just can't, you really, really need to be focused on and both allow your previous experience to inform you, but not let them to, to cloud what you're doing.
Yeah. And I also think there's sort of the sense of collective nostalgia that can kind of take hold
Mm,
sometimes too.
yeah. And so I assume that, you have not reproduced the Maru Bhajia experience from Nairobi. And
I've never, it's so, I brought that up earlier this week too.
yeah.
I keep thinking about, it was, I don't even know if it's fair to call it a restaurant, the version, the one that I used to go to, but I keep thinking about how when I would go there, my grandmother was kind of a regular. And so it was this idealized restaurant experience of walking in and just knowing everyone and everyone's business and knowing that person just had a kid and this person owes that person money. Not just the people who were dining there, but the people working there too, because it was kind of like a for us, by us restaurant. So my grandmother knew everyone.
Mm,
And I've always, like, what would it be like to have a relationship like that with a restaurant? I
yeah.
will probably never know, you know?
I mean, the subcultural and aspect of things, right? There's just so rich. You can think about sort of so many different sociologic experiments that you could
Mhm.
probably do just by observation. Um, I'll share one experience with you. My wife and I went to a restaurant in San Francisco and had just the most wonderful food and a great experience. And then we went back again, and we sort of felt like we were, okay, it's our second time. We feel like we're a little bit more of a regular fixture here, at least the second time around. And the food was, I don't know, kind of mid and just not
Mm.
really like feeling it. But we had an even better actual experience when we were there the second time. And so, is there value to what those repeat experiences or those revisits are? But as a critic,
Oh, as a critic, for sure, I think you can, you know, from one night to the next, from one month to the next, from one year to the next, experience the same place in a completely different way. And it's not like a performance art piece. I can't go to the same restaurant 365 times
right,
and
right.
then write about it. Unfortunately, like, have to limit it to a couple of times. But I do think it's only fair to go more than once.
Mm,
But it's interesting how, I don't know, it's interesting how you're talking about that experience of the food being not as good, but you loving the place more.
yeah.
That's such an interesting tension. I think about that a lot.
Yeah. And again, I mean, like, I don't know if we would necessarily go back. There's so many factors that go into that,
Sure.
and, who you're with and, who you're actually dining with. And for that matter, the cost and the price and those kinds of things certainly factor in.
But restaurants can become meaningful because you keep returning to them.
Right.
You
Right.
make it special by going back and like being in relationship with the restaurant. And that's a really, that's what was happening at Marubajia, but we get to choose the places we go back to. And I think if we are obsessed with the new restaurant and all we want to do is go to the new restaurant and the new restaurant, you never get that. You never get to feel that way. You never get to have that relationship. And I think that's really sad.
Yeah, no, totally. And it's again about this whole idea of cultivating trust in those relationships and
Hmm.
how do you sort of make them sticky and enduring. You and I share something in common in that we both spent summers in Pune
Oh, yeah.
with family in our formative years. So I want to ask you this, because tying that back to at least the audience who may be listening or watching to this, how is being a South Asian American in a way relevant to your work?
I think all the parts of my identity are relevant to my work in a way that I didn't always see, but I see now. I think like every critic, sort of the criticism that's fun to read, at least, or the criticism I emotionally connect to, the critic is kind of bringing their whole self to the work. You don't see the whole person in every piece, but like those pieces all add up to something bigger. And I hope that I can't say exactly how, but I hope that that part of myself also informs the work, both in terms of what I see, what I notice, what I enjoy, what I convey to readers. I hope it's all there, but it's hard to kind of have the space from your own work to see it. So I don't know that I can, you know?
Do you think it bleeds into sort of how you think or operate on a daily basis? I mean, most people think of their anchors and tethers through family or through their cultural traditions, but
Hmm.
are there other elements of your South Asian Americanness, if that's even a part of something you think about when you're working?
I don't think about it consciously. But I think it's always present.
Yeah.
I have a lot of South Asian American friends, and I used to feel more British, like British Asian than I do now. I feel a lot of distance now, but I left when I was, 9. But I grew up in a very different way from like my Desi friends here, who some of them went to camp with other South Asians. Like I was often really isolated.
Yeah.
There are places we lived where I'd be the only kid in school who didn't. When we moved to, I'll be more specific.
France or
When we moved to
yeah.
France, it was a very small village, and I had to learn French. There were no other South Asians in that village, and so my family had they didn't say it out loud. They didn't say like adapt or die. But my brother and I always joke that if we had like a family crest, or a family flag, like that's just what would
Adapt or die.
be embroidered on there. It was like, yeah, you're just going to learn to,
Yeah.
this is our home now. These are our people. We're going to learn how to cook this food. We're going to learn how to speak this language. It was just so, it was never said out loud, but that's just the way it was in my
Yeah.
family. Yeah.
Yeah.
Over and over.
I think about that a lot where like how what we've been programmed to do. And like you said, like you're not consciously thinking about your South Asian Americanness, but again, your experience is very unique and that adaptability, like the family crest is one to think about. And I'm so curious, like as you have now woven your way through professional experiences, personal experiences in the US in many different corners of the United States, what maybe have you had to perhaps unlearn or let go of in order to find sort of peace?
You mean in terms of that part of my identity?
Yeah. Or anything for that matter. Like, in order for you to find direct success, in the business you're in and for that
Hmm.
matter as a writer or a critic, are there elements of your own kind of persona or your identity or anything for that matter that you've had to either unlearn or sort of shed for you to find that peace and success?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I used to be much more uncomfortable kind of thinking out loud. Do you know what I mean? Or
Hmm.
presenting anything that wasn't perfect and finished. And
Yeah.
I don't know if this is you know, my personality or if this is part of my identity, but I am trying actively still to be more and more comfortable with just like making a mistake. Like the
Yeah.
world will not end. It's okay if I make a mistake. It's okay if I have to try this again. Um, that's like a constant process of unlearning. Like it's okay
Right.
for this to be imperfect. Keep going.
Right. Keep going. Adapt or and conform, right?
Yeah. Adapt or die.
How much has, this idea of being able to be comfortable with the imperfections, how much has parenting helped accelerate that?
Oh, what a great, I think I am doing a lot in parenting. I'm doing a lot of work that feels, I don't want to make this too much of a therapy session, but I definitely, a lot of memories are coming up from when I was a little kid, and I'm thinking about, there's like I feel a tenderness towards this like version of myself who was put in these
Mm.
very difficult situations. So, my kid just transitioned from her baby class to her preschool class. And I promise the story has a point. And every day for a week, her teachers in her old class would take her for maybe an hour into what would then become her new class, just to ease the transition that was
Yeah.
coming. And they would update us every day, and they would take pictures, and they were so kind of thoughtful about it and so supportive. And then by the time it was her first day, she was really ready for it. She knew all the teachers there, she knew all the kids there. It wasn't like the version of this that I experienced was just like, "Oh, by the way, the school you're going to today, no one speaks English."
Right.
Like it was so many people worked together to make it comfortable and to make it easier. And I just think like there's so many there are different ways to do this. There are
Yeah.
different ways to do this, and I really appreciate it. And yeah, it makes me feel a lot of tenderness for that like little version of me who felt like a soldier going to war or something.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, you're right. There are so many different ways to do that. And,
Yeah.
accelerating both the imperfections that we know as children who've had to adapt fast and get thrown into a pool versus the very, very, I mean, gosh, I would love to be at your daughter's preschool. It just sounds amazing. Let me ask you one thing about, back to the sort of, critic life,
Mhm.
but how do you normalize the difference between, I mean, we're talking about sort of like a regularity to a restaurant and being part of that culture, but how do you normalize the difference between being a kind of local regular diner versus being a very well informed tourist?
Yeah, no, I think about that a lot. So when I'm going to, especially if I'm going somewhere I haven't been before, that's happened too. I think I owe it to the city and to the restaurant, to do a lot of research and to
Mm.
spend time there and understand the place. And I think there'll always be a gap between if you're a reporter or critic dropping into a place to do that work versus a local critic or a local reporter. Like the context I have is going to be different. And it's just about like being honest about that and being aware of that, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think that self awareness is probably huge. Do you ever feel like you can mirror that local experience, or is that you have to accept that that's not something that you can try and mirror and don't, and not attempt to even do that?
I mean, yeah, I think what the experience I'm getting is always going to be as someone who is visiting, right? And as someone
Yeah.
who is observing. So I just do my best to pay very close attention.
Yeah.
What is my experience? Let me not pretend it's something else. Let me be true to this version.
Yeah, no, totally. I'm going to draw one other parallel back to doctoring, and I promise this might land. We'll see. But I was thinking about this in sort of thinking about what to ask you about as far as restaurant experiences go. And doctors' offices are notorious for the waiting part of your office visit, and so I'm a bit out of frame to necessarily comment on this, but how does waiting or anticipation how does that element of the restaurant culture affect a review?
Do you mean waiting when you're at the restaurant? Waiting?
No, I thought about this, right? I was trying
Yeah,
to like dissect out what waiting means, but I think it actually means every element of it, right? You
yeah,
wait to get a reservation, you wait when you're there, you wait for all kinds of things.
yeah.
And that waiting doesn't always have to be bad, right? I mean, like that waiting builds anticipation and excitement
Mhm.
and or maybe anxiety. I don't know.
Well, yeah, what kind of fills, I guess what ends up filling the space when you're waiting?
Mm.
I'm very I mean, I'm very comfortable with, I don't know, the physical liminal space of waiting, like a waiting room or those little chairs in the restaurant where you're actually waiting. That the waiting in a literal sense is not, it doesn't bother me, but I was just thinking about how when you're sitting at a table and you're waiting, it could be like 5 minutes in one restaurant feels very can feel very different from 5 minutes in another restaurant. And some of that has to do with your own, where are you at and your own emotional state, what's on your mind. And then it also has to do with the people in the room. How are the people in the room making you feel? Are they making you feel like warm and welcome and like something good is on its way? Or are they making you feel like they kind of wish you weren't there? And is that a real feeling or are you in a bad mood and you're projecting? Like
Right.
there's so much going on. It's actually really complicated.
Well, and I've thought about the anatomy also, or even just like the experience of driving by someplace, knowing it's a really small restaurant and seeing a
Hmm.
line that's going around the block to get food from this place. And is that generating some sort of level of excitement for me, saying that like, look at that, there's a million people,
Yeah.
they're all waiting and they're spending hours waiting potentially. And I wonder, there's such a waiting culture also with food that people go through as well.
Oh yeah. I think people see people waiting and just want to jump in
Yeah.
and wait
Yeah.
too. And then the waiting is like a communal experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let me finish with this one. And, I was wondering about, how, first off, I did have one question. You have as your kind of avatar on both your email and on your website a picture of some radicchio,
Oh
or
yeah.
chicory. I mean, I was just curious what that is. That does that say anything about sort of you and your personality in any way?
Oh, I guess you could read into it. It's, it's bitter. It's a bitter green.
It's also very essential in some ways, packed with vitamins, very nourishing.
I love radicchio. It's one of my favorite salad leaves. I love all the different varieties. There's some really beautiful ones. And that particular photo, you can't really get a sense of it because it's cropped into like a tiny little circle.
Right.
But the photo by this photographer, this Times photographer, Tony Chenichola, is just I think it's a beautiful photo.
There you go. Well, hopefully, saying all kinds of things and meanings that are a proxy for you. Like I said, let me get you out of here on this. I mean, if you had to think about today, at least, and I know this changes over time, but if you had to think about three people, either living or past, to share a meal with you, who would you invite? Where would you potentially go, and what might you eat?
There is a time where I would have said a bunch of, writers who I admire, poets I admire, but I feel like I'm not. But I really thinking about my grandparents a lot lately, and I would 100%. I would feel like I would give anything to have dinner with them.
Would
Can I
you?
say four? Four
Yeah,
people?
absolutely. Yeah. Grandparents get free passes no matter what. But is there a specific place that you would want to visit? Is there a particular kind of experience you would hope to have? And that would say something that speaks to both their legacy and memory and maybe to what you experienced now.
I would love to cook for them. I would cook for them, and it would be like a dinner at home, like one of those long, long dinners where people get up and do things and then come back to the table and go on a walk after dinner, that kind of thing. What would I cook? I would, this would be very stressful, but I think I would cook a biryani
There you go.
and then like
Yeah.
lots of little vegetable side dishes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I
Well, that
answer the
sounds
question?
You absolutely did. That sounds super lovely. Having a meal with loved ones and going for walks and sharing lots of great conversation. Very much like, I hope this experience has been for you. Really, readers are enjoying it. I know I'm enjoying it. And thank you so much, Tejal, for joining us on Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Thanks so much for having me.
This was lovely.
It
Appreciate it.
was. Thank you.
You're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Stay tuned.